You are about to drop real money on proxies for your sneaker bot. And the whole game lives or dies on one choice. Mobile or residential. Pick wrong and your bot eats bans on the cards that actually mattered. The limited drops you waited weeks for. So here's the answer first, then I will show you exactly why, with the real reasons and not the marketing version. Run a hardware proxy farm in Singapore. Real phones, real SIM cards from Singtel, M1 and StarHub. I set up these exact connections for resellers every day, so I am not reading this off a sales page. I am telling you what survives a real drop and what folds the moment a serious site looks closely. Here's the verdict up front, before any of the explanation. Use mobile for the parts that must not get flagged, the checkout and the account itself. Use residential to spread the cheap volume, the monitoring and the early add to cart tasks. Most serious cookers run both, and the people who only buy one type are usually the ones complaining about bans. Now let me justify every word of that. First, what these two things actually are, because the marketing blurs it on purpose and half the providers out there rebrand one as the other. A residential proxy is a real home IP. It comes from a regular broadband ISP, the same kind of connection a person uses at home to watch Netflix and check email. Retailers see a home address on the network owned by a consumer ISP and not a hosting company, and they treat it like a normal shopper who could be anyone scrolling for shoes. That is the entire appeal. You blend into the millions of ordinary people browsing from their couch. A mobile proxy is a carrier IP. It comes from a phone on a 4G or 5G network sitting behind a carrier gateway that a lot of real customers share at the exact same time. On my farm, that phone is a real handset with a real Singtel M1 or StarHub SIM in it, not a number plugged into software somewhere. That sharing is the whole trick, and it is why mobile sits in a different class than everything else you can buy. Here is why retailers and the anti-bot systems trust carrier IPs so highly. Mobile carriers run something called CGNet, which is Carrier-Grade Network Address Translation, and what it means in plain English is that one public IP is shared by hundreds or thousands of real people right now. Everyone on that cell tower goes out through the same handful of addresses, so when your bot comes through that IP, you look like one more real shopper in a crowd of real shoppers, not a lone suspicious connection sitting on its own. That crowd is your armor. A retailer cannot just ban that IP, because banning it would block all the genuine paying customers sitting behind it too. Imagine a brand blocking a whole chunk of Singtel mobile subscribers on launch day because one of them looked like a bot. That is lost sales and angry customers, so they will not do it lightly. That collateral damage is exactly what anti-bot teams are scared of, so carrier IPs get the benefit of the doubt far more often than anything else on the internet. Let me make that ban resistance even more concrete, because it is the single most important thing you are paying for. On a hard target, the anti-bot system scores every request, and a big input to that score is how risky the IP is. A mobile IP with thousands of real users behind it scores as low risk almost by default, because punishing it punishes real customers. A fresh residential IP scores medium. A flagged or overused IP scores high and gets the capture wall or the silent fail where your order just never goes through. Residential IPs are trusted too, just one level down. A home IP looks like one household, not a crowd. So if a retailer decides to block it, the only collateral is that one home, which makes the ban a much easier call for them. That is the core difference in plain terms, and it is why residential gets burned on the hardest sites while mobile keeps walking through. Now the strengths of residential, because it is not the loser here, and anyone who tells you to never touch it is selling you something. The pools are huge, often millions of IPs across a country, so you can spread 1,000 tasks across 1,000 different homes without ever reusing the same one twice in a session. That breadth is something a mobile pool simply cannot match on raw numbers. And residential is cheaper per GB, which matters a lot when your bot is hammering a product page every single second waiting for a restock to drop. Let me talk about cost per GB honestly, because this is where the math bites people. Residential is billed by the gigabyte, and it is the cheaper option. So a job that pulls a lot of data, lots of page loads, lots of polling, stays affordable. Mobile costs more per gigabyte because behind every one of those gigabytes is a real phone, a real SIM, a real data plan, and real electricity in my facility. You are not paying for a number in a database. You are paying for hardware that actually sits on a carrier network. And that cost gap is exactly why you do not put everything on mobile. If you route your restock monitoring through premium carrier IPs, you are spending the expensive trust on requests that carry almost no risk. That is pure waste. Monitoring is reading a public page over and over. The site barely cares, so that is textbook residential work where cheap volume is the whole point. So, residential shines on volume and on cost. If a job is mostly about throwing a lot of cheap requests at a site to watch for stock, residential is the smart spend. You do not want to pay carrier prices to refresh a page 1,000 times an hour. Now, mobile, where it earns the premium. Mobile shines on trust and on ban resistance. When you get to the moment that actually counts, loading the checkout, logging into the account, submitting the payment, that is where the carrier IP earns its price. It is the request you cannot afford to have flagged, because a flag there does not just cost you the cart, it can cost you the account and every other task riding on it. Mobile also rotates on the carrier schedule, which is a real advantage that residential cannot copy cleanly. You get fresh carrier IPs that still carry the same trusted carrier signature, so a soft block resets without you suddenly looking like a different kind of connection. On my farm, a clean rotation hands you a brand new sticky carrier IP from the same pool, same carrier, same ASIN, just a new address. The site sees a fresh customer, not a server hopping around. Now let me be straight about speed, because nobody likes this part. Mobile runs a touch slower than residential and a lot slower than a data center proxies. It is a real phone on a real cellular network with real radio latency. So you might see a little more delay per request. For a checkout, that is fine. You are submitting one critical request and you want it to land clean, not at the speed of light. For high frequency monitoring, that extra delay adds up, which is another reason monitoring belongs on faster, cheaper residential. Now the honest trade-off put together, because this is where people get sold a fantasy. Mobile is pricier and a bit slower, but it is hard to burn. Residential is cheaper and quicker, but those IPs burn faster, especially the cheap shared ones that 100 other botters already torched on the same site earlier today, before you ever touched them. You are often inheriting someone else's bad reputation on a cheap residential IP without even knowing it. So think about it as where you spend the trust. A residential IP is a chip you are willing to lose. You can throw a stack of them at a problem and shrug when some get burned. A mobile IP is the chip you push in only when the pot is real and the hand is worth winning. Matching the proxy to the risk of the task is the entire skill here, and it is the thing that separates people who cop consistently from people who keep buying more proxies and wondering why they still get banned. While list a bit in concrete terms, so it is not abstract. Running 100 tasks just monitoring a restock. Use residential all day, it is cheap and the requests are low risk because all you are doing is reading a page. Firing the actual checkout on a limited drop. Use mobile, sticky, one clean IP held for each account through the whole session so the site sees a single steady shopper from start to finish. That split, cheap eyes everywhere and expensive trust at the moment of purchase is exactly what experienced cookers actually do. Here is a second scenario, account warming, because that is where a lot of cops are really won or lost weeks before the drop. If you are aging accounts in the run-up to a big release, logging in, browsing, building a normal looking history, keep each account on a stable sticky mobile IP from the same carrier the whole time. An account that lived its entire life on one trusted carrier IP and then checks out from that same IP looks like a real person who shops from their phone. An account that warmed on cheap rotating residential and then jumps to a brand new IP at checkout looks exactly like what it is. Now the common mistakes, because most failed cops are not a proxy problem, they are a usage problem. Mistake 1. reusing the same IP across many accounts at once. Even a great mobile IP looks wrong if 20 of your accounts all check out from it in the same minute. So keep it one trusted IP per account on the risky actions. Mistake 2. Jumping IPs mid-sessions. If your account browses on one address and then suddenly checks out from a totally different one, that location jump is a giant flag to any decent anti-bot system. That is the entire reason sticky sessions exist. So hold one IP for the whole flow that matters from cart to confirmations. Mistake 3. And this is the big one. Blaming the proxy when the real problem is your fingerprint. Here is the part no proxy salesman will tell you. No proxy fixes a bad bot fingerprint. If your browser leaks automation, if your headers are wrong, if your DNS is resolving through your real home resolver while your IP says Singapore, you get flagged no matter how clean the IP is. The proxy is one layer, the fingerprint is another, and they have to agree or the whole thing falls apart. That DNS point is the one I fix for people the most, because almost everybody leaks it without knowing. So the way I run it, you get real SG mobile EPS, sticky sessions that hold for the whole checkout, and DNS that routes through the tunnel so you stop leaking your real resolver and giving yourself away. If you want to try that on your next drop, there is a free trial at Singapore Plamsit Proxy. com/client/trial and the code YT30 takes 30% off your first month. So the verdict one more time. Clean. Mobile for the checkout and the account actions that must not get flagged. Residential to spread the cheap volume and the monitoring. Run both, match the IP to the risk of the task, hold sticky on the moments that matter, and fix your fingerprint before you blame the proxy for anything. If this helped you cop, subscribe. I put out 2 new videos every weekday on this stuff straight from the farm. See you in the next one.